pretty obvious. Cheating, huh, as I like to call it. Hey, hi, my name's Dan Nelson. Thank you for joining me again today. So today I'm doing something I've actually never done before, never had to do that I know of, never had to do before, and that is redo. I want to choose my language carefully. By my own choice, I'm I've had to touch up wedding paintings. Actually, I've got one on the board right now that I need to touch up. But last Saturday, this is Monday, 2 days ago, 2 nights ago, I painted a lovely wedding for Cameron and her groom at the Carolina Country Club in downtown Raleigh. And I am actually quite happy. Let me try to get the exposure to adjust here on this real quickly. So that, come on, come on, come on. There we go. Okay, now hopefully you'll be able to see it a little bit better. The painting, this is not finished, but I'm happy to say I'm quite happy with the composition, which is sort of the one thing you can't fix. You know, once you're this far along, you'd have to start over from scratch. Anyway, like the composition, major vertical element here, and the bride and groom right in the middle. I mentioned this on Saturday when I was painting. I like the chandelier here, the shaft of light here, which falls on the bride and groom. There'll be a secondary light source up here, so on and so on. Mother of the groom, mother of the bride over here, just very, very roughly sketched, and of course the cake. So I like the composition. What I don't like about it is the bride and groom. Now let me tell you what happened. And of course, with every situation like this, I try to learn a lesson. What I'm not happy with is what I ended up with for the bride and groom. And here's how that happened. I always take, with my camera phone, I take pictures. And I don't know if your phone does this. Mine, by the way, I'm an artist. I consider this to be a camera. Well, oh yeah, kind of a sort of a phone attached to it. Okay, it's not a phone with a camera. I'm an artist, so it's a camera. And in that regard, so far, just for what it's worth, so far, up until maybe the iPhone 8, I don't know, but the Droid cameras have been, in my opinion, one step ahead of the iPhones all the way along. Let me show you, just since I'm on the subject, what I like about the Droid cameras. You see how big? How close can I get? Oh, let me zoom in a little bit more here. Hang on, let me make sure I'm in your frame. Okay, here's just, again, not to rag or brag either one, yet to rag on the iPhones or brag on Droids, but here's the function. You see how big that, okay, let's do this one. This is even a better image right there. How large that image is, or how small it is. Now, let's zoom in to, say, just the hands. Okay, it's not going to let us. Let's go back over to this one. Sorry about that. Okay, here's what the iPhone can't do. It doesn't. Now, there are ways to trick the iPhone into doing this, but it can't zoom in. And getting that large is such a help when you're doing portraits. So let's say I'm doing that eye. That's like 20 times what it's going to be. And I'll talk about these grid lines that you see here. Anyway, so again, just for what it's worth, I'm using that function. So I was painting Saturday night. I take also one of the things that this phone does, and probably the iPhone does too, I can put it in what I call machine gun mode. I just hold down the button and it takes 10, 20, up to 30 pictures in 2 seconds or something like that. So while a couple is dancing, I'm talked to the photographers already. I said, I'm not a weird uncle. I need a photograph for a painting. And so I'm taking pictures of them. And as soon as the first dance is over, I scoot to a back room somewhere, sit down on a chair, and take several minutes to go through 100 or 150 photographs. Not each one. Many of the burst shots, I can say, nothing there's going to work. So what happened was that on Saturday, there was only one photograph of the groom that I was satisfied with. So that's the picture I took. Not really realizing that it wasn't that great a photograph of the bride. And of course, the bride is the star of the show at a reception, and in a wedding painting of a reception. It's the bride. I thought that I could take what I had and just tweak it. That's the mistake that I made. And don't go tweaking. And just, if you don't have a picture you can work with, I should have grabbed the bride and groom and say, you know what, I didn't get one to turn out. Let me take it again. I hate to bother them, so I didn't do that. This is not bad. And of course, people were nice. They came back and say, oh, it looks exactly like them. And inwardly, I smiled and nodded, but inwardly I'm going, yeah. Okay. Good news. Got home Saturday night, but got to work this morning. Went to my iPhoto, which is again another good thing. I'm sure that I don't mean iPhoto. I went to Google Photo, which comes with a Droid. Every picture that I take on my camera automatically gets uploaded into the cloud, and I can access it. So thank God I could go to my iPhoto account on my computer, and I found another picture of the bride. Hallelujah. I just spent about an hour, maybe more, upstairs at my big computer, at my iMac, photoshopping the new picture of the bride, whose name is Cameron, new photo of Cameron, on top of the old photo. And that's what I showed you very briefly just a few minutes ago. Let me show it to you again. So this is what I ended up with. Of course, you can't tell that that's been photoshopped at all. I also have a printed out version of it, which I will use somewhat as I go along. In fact, I'll go ahead and stick that up here right now. But honestly, I'm going to use my phone a lot more than I'm going to use these printed copies. Whew. So are you with me so far? Never had to do this before, but doggone it, I do not want a painting of this quality to escape. Maybe 2 years ago, I would have been willing to say that's good enough. It's a beautiful painting. I'm sure I would have said that 2 years ago, a year ago maybe, but not anymore. Part of the good news about getting old as an artist is you don't have to get bad. I'm still on the uphill climb, man. I mean, a steep uphill climb. I'm getting better. I'm happy to say I'm getting better. So I am not happy with this. Now, I would like to think that I could just stand here this morning with this photograph and these photographs and just repaint the bride on top of, and groom on top. I wasn't happy with him either, by the way. I would like to think I could do that, but nope. I've learned better. I can't. Now, here's one of the reasons why. I'm going to be shifting her about, a quarter of an inch this way. Him, I'm just going to be refining slightly. I've learned that when you try to retrofit, paint on top of, and adjust, it gets wonky really fast, really hard to do that. So sad to say, I've had to go all the way back to, I'm going to repaint them completely, which, yeah, that's a pain. Let me just tell you, again, I feel like should be talking to artists. I don't like, I'm getting paid pretty decently for a wedding painting, so that takes some of the sting out, but still, I like to get paid a lot per hour, and by doing this, I'm diminishing my cost per hour. That's what hurts, okay, because here I am taking a whole half a day to do this. Here's what softens the blow, mitigates against the pain of having to do something again. You know what it is? It's because I'm an artist, doggone it. And if you're an artist, you know what I'm talking about. I love producing good art. This doesn't quite make the grade. So hopefully at the end of this afternoon, when I've redone this and obliterated the bad stuff completely, and of course tried to make it, blended it in so you can't tell that I've retrofitted it, I will have created a thing of beauty. That'll make me happy. So that's, even though I hate spending extra time, yeah, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be worth it at the end of the day when I have done a painting I'm really proud of. Okay, so I re-gridded this from scratch. Usually I do the grids on my phone, and if you haven't heard that before, let me show you very quickly the app that I use to do gridding with. And I'll just show you the icon. It's called Artist's Grid Tool. It's that one. It's, come on. Sorry. My finger hit the screen, which you know. This is the tool that I'm sorry. Here we go. Okay, it's that one right there. It has a little, you know, what's his name's painting of a little angel. Artist Grid Tool. That's what I use to put a grid on. And while we're talking about grids, some of you need to hear this. Some of you, and since I'm just talking to you so much, let me go out wider so you can see me a little better. Most artists want to be artists, especially if you took art class in 7th, 8th, 9th grade. I'm talking junior high, middle school level here. You learned how to do a grid. Good for you. I'm going to show you 2 tricks right now to take your, if you're going to cheat, and this is certainly cheating, if you're going to cheat, then cheat good, would you? Cheat right, cheat well, cheat with skill. Okay, quick explanation. Some of you are going to leave a comment and say, it's not cheating. No, it is. Anytime you measure in any way whatsoever, even if it's with calipers, or with your brush, anytime you're cheating, it's legal. Okay, first of all, absolutely legal to cheat. Today, I wouldn't dream of it. Well, I wouldn't dream of it, but I'm not going to do this without cheating. I'm flat going to cheat, so it's legal. Are you with me so far? No guilt, no pressure. Do it when you have to. Here's the big caveat. There's a big but coming. Do you hear a big but coming? But every time you cheat, I'm going to use picturesque language just for fun. Every time you cheat, your brain is shrinking. And I don't know if that gives you fear or not. It should, because you shouldn't like the idea of your brain. What I'm really saying is your skills at seeing and copying are declining. And nobody wants their skills to decline. So here's what you do. You cheat when you have to. You cheat when you must. And in between cheating, you build up your brain again, like last night. So for me, Daily Art Adventure, last night, 3:26, I think it was, where I'm sitting on the couch doing sketch after sketch after sketch. By the way, that's the word. How do you build your brain up? The answer is sketch. No cheating, no gridding, no projecting, no tracing. Just look and draw, look and draw, look and draw. So last night, I was building my skills up. Therefore, in a way, I feel like I have permission today to, okay, it's okay if my brain shrinks a little bit because, doggone, I built it so big yesterday. I have brain despair. And again, I'm being facetious. So cheating is legal. But let's talk about, if you're going to do that grid thing, for goodness sake, do it good. Do it right, okay? I'm going to give you 2 tips. And again, I'm going to try to show you the picture on my phone so you can see both of these tricks. Okay, and I'm not sure which of these you can see better. I'm assuming it's going to be here on my phone. So I'm going to zoom in again and try to get this in the right place. Okay. I think you can see. Do you see? So here's the image that I put a grid over the whole thing. But here's one trick. Learn this. It's a 2-color grid. First of all, in this case, I put down a red grid. Let's just call the red grid is every square inch, just for point of reference, okay? Then the blue grid is on top of that, also at every inch, but it's offset by 1/2 inch. So the squares now are 1/2 inch squares. Does that make sense to you? Now, if you've ever done gridding before, if you've done it, the smaller the grid gets, the easier it is to screw up and lose your place. And if you think, those of you who've done this, you know what I'm talking about. If you've done a grid, you've discovered how hard it is to, it's easy when you first get started, but then 5, 10, 15 minutes later, you're doing it, oh my God, oh crap, I got in the wrong place. So this 2-color grid helps. Hey, if you want to go one step more, you could do a 3-color grid. But I've got something maybe a little simpler than that. So that's tip number 1. If you're going to do a grid, and by the way, this can be done on that grid tool, you have to do a grid in red, save it, close out the app, and then start a completely separate grid. This takes some skill. I don't know if I ever want to show you this, but you figure it out. You can do it. Then you do a separate grid in blue on top of the first one, making sure the two grids are exactly the same size, and so on and so on and so on and so forth. I'm just trusting you to be able to figure that part out. Here's the other trick I want to show you. And I learned this. I didn't learn this till I was in my 40s. 20 years ago, I took what is called a Renaissance painting class, and the teacher, who was actually getting his doctorate in physics, so he's a physics guy, an engineer guy, teaching art. It was pretty fascinating to watch how his brain worked. And he said, yeah, grid, schmid. First of all, you put down a grid, and then you start doing the serious stuff. So let me show you what the serious stuff is. After you've put down, again, a two-color grid, you're not done yet. You can come back. If you're going to do a grid, man, do a killer grid. So I just did a little bit this morning, again, to show you. So here's the image of just a close-up of the bride and groom's head. And if I zoom in here real big, I think you're going to be able to see it. Yes, you can. Do you see those yellow diagonals? So that's the, if you will, that's the third layer. First layer red, second layer blue, third layer. And it's really easy to do. All you do is find your vortexes, find your crosshairs somewhere and say, okay, I'm going to add a yellow line, yellow, green, chartreuse, whatever. It could be the same color, but again, third color helps. And I'm going to go from this point to this point. Why? Because it goes right through the groom's eye, goes right through the bride's nose. So that's a good line. And then here's another one over here that I did. Again, see, you understand it's easy to find these end points. So this one goes right, gives me almost the exact angle. So I did 3 of those. I did one more over here on the groom. So I did 3 diagonals. So that, just a little tip for some of you who want to do the grid thing. Man, go ahead. If you're going to cheat with an A+. Don't cheat with a B- junior high and middle school grid, okay, where you just put up a square. Let's do it good. Whew. Now, I'm going to start drawing. I've already started just a tiny bit, as you saw. And by the way, so I transferred all of that grid. Let me make sure you can see it. I've already done this. You didn't need to watch me do this. Come on, let's wait for the auto exposure to adjust. There we go. Okay. So I did all of this gridding with watercolor pencils. That's a good trick because it'll wipe off. This is a dry oil painting. It's oil painting, but it's all dry, of course. And I used a red pencil and a blue pencil, and instead of yellow, I used a chartreuse watercolor pencil. That's a key factor there. And I do it with a really sharp. You have this one of these sharpeners. I buy these, by the way. I have 20 of them in a drawer somewhere. So the gridding is all done, and now I'm beginning. Now this is the time where you just get in your quiet inner Zen-like place and just relax. Of course, it's a lot more relaxing here for me doing this here without an audience. Well, you guys are watching, but you know what I mean? I'm under a lot of pressure at a reception, which I enjoy, by the way. I enjoy that pressure. But I'm going to just try to stay relaxed, take my time, and, now that I'm drawing this, by the way, I wish I'd done a lot more yellow lines over here. I could really use some help. Okay, so, and I'm not going to make you watch me do this for obvious reasons. I mean, this is just tedium to the max, right? I talked last week about, I said something like this. Those people, those who will not endure the pain of tediousness, those who will not endure the pain of tedium will never become skilled craftsmen. And it is craftsmanship that builds up the artist's happy place, soul, good feelings. All is good with the world because, look, I just sculpted this Madonna and child out of frickin' marble. I didn't do that. I'm pretending I'm Michelangelo. You with me? Or Bellini. These guys, they were freaks of nature, especially Bellini, I think I'm saying that name right. Anyway, but I feel pretty happy with my paintings when I've really knocked it out. Skill, craftsmanship. Not again what is somewhat popular in the modern in 20th century painting. It wasn't about craftsmanship. It was about cleverness, creativity, cleverness, and uh, a badass attitude. Forgive me for the bad language, but there's just no better way to put it. And yeah, most of the Picasso type people in the 20th century, who made it big, Michael Basquiat, and so on. They did it because of their attitude, because of their badass attitude and creativity. The problem is that doesn't build up the health of their inner person, if I can use that kind of language. Craftsmanship does. Craftsmanship makes me happy way down deep. Okay, let me repeat myself. I don't know who I'm talking to out there, but somebody, especially you young people, need to hear this. He or she who will not endure the pain of tedium will never achieve craftsmanship. And craftsmanship, of course, is what, for me, pays the bills. That's why I'm a good artist, and the next guy down the road is not so good, because I am busting my buns to be good. It means I'm going to stand here for a long time today, relatively speaking, 30, 40, 50 minutes, whatever it is, doing this, and it'd be dreadfully boring for you to watch. So I'm going to take a break right here. I'll bring you back later. But the day will be happy when at the end of the day, I'm going to have a killer portrait of this woman. And doing portraits this high, by the way, it's really hard. Tedium, craftsmanship. Doing a portrait this size is easy compared to doing a portrait this size. I've ranted and raved long enough. Thank you for your company. Again, I'm going to take a break here. I'm going to keep this particular episode going for a while because I want to bring you back in then when I begin to do the painting. But you don't want to watch me do this. This is tedium. It's going to take a while. Okay, thanks for your company. I'll be
Hello, Warren Moses. Thank you for that nice comment. I appreciate it. I am back. Welcome, friends. And I have finished, I think, at least for now, I've finished the bride and groom. Let me bring you in as tight as I can to show you that work. There is no question that when I'm left to my own devices, and when I don't have the pressure of an audience and a performer, I slow way down, and that distresses me a little bit. I took way too long finishing that painting. That's the bad news. The good news is I think it's a pretty good likeness of both the bride and the groom, and so I think I'm happy with that. I'll actually look at it again with fresh eyes tomorrow. The last thing in the world I need to do is spend more time on this painting, but the worse than that is, so it's not the last thing in the world, worse than that would be to let an inferior painting get delivered to a client. So that's what it looks like. So let me put this up here just for a minute so that the automatic exposure adjusts itself to a better setting. There we go. So I'm down to the final phase, the final stage of my painting, my typical traditional painting process. And in this case, of course, obviously, I started with the focal point. Nothing in the rest of the canvas is going to be as tight and as realistic as that. That's pretty standard operating procedure for portrait painters going back, and obviously I'm subscribing to that mode of thinking. So now my job is to finish the rest of the painting, probably stepping back often to make sure that I'm keeping essentially a balance between this and everything else. Nothing else will come anywhere near, will not match this part of the painting for accuracy and detail, but there needs to be a symbiosis, a balance between this and the rest of the painting. So I need to bring up much of the rest of the painting, not the whole thing, by no means, again, by no means bringing it up as nearly as far, but I need to bring it up somewhat so that it doesn't look like two separate paintings. Does that make sense? I have here a photograph of the beautiful, huge, that rose construction that I just showed you is about 9 or 10 feet tall. And it was my client, the bride's mother, was understandably very proud of those and made even a special mention of it in my instructions before I got there. So I think I would have done it anyway because they do indeed stand out. So I'm painting those. I'm glad I got a photograph. I've also got a photograph of the bar here. I want to work on the bar because speaking of, do you see this area down here? Is much too busy because of the looseness of those brush strokes. They're actually, the texture is getting too much attention. So I need to come down here and mixing up some pale opaque stuff. I don't want to lose all of that nice energy, if you know what I mean by that. I don't want to cover it up, like plaster over it is the immature response to something like this. I do not want to plaster over it, but I do want to diminish it. So I'm going to use this opaque paint in many cases. As you can see, it's an architectural element, a simple architectural box shape element on the front of the bar, but it's way too prominent the way it is right now. So I'm just going to come in here and see, like that one is maybe finished, and just keep the feeling. This is a good example I've mentioned many times about when you're painting in a loose painterly style. And of course, when I say that in this case, that is all except for this. That is not loose. Okay, got it? But the rest of the painting is loose. And when you're painting in a loose painterly style, how do you render small objects? Because you can't pull up a small brush and stick out your tongue and start doing, again, what I call tongue painting. That's not the solution. Well, the answer is to do what you see me doing right here. Like, you see that stroke right there? It's too bold, it's too loud, it's too strong. Well, I'm just going to skinny it up. I skinned it up quite a bit. So now there's still a dark streak there, but I've covered it up much. I've created a narrow stroke where there was a wide one. I'm going to do a very similar thing right here. So I'm very much using the underpainting, and as I say, the energy of the underpainting, which was done with great aplomb, which is done with speed and confidence, looseness. So they are nice strokes, and I don't want to lose the effect of those strokes, but I can diminish them by covering up part of them. Okay, that's just a good tip for those of you who are perhaps just learning how to paint, especially if you're painting my way, which is layers of transparent color followed up ultimately by a layer of opaque. So this is the part of the painting process. If you're following my technique, this is what I call overpainting. Now, for some reason, we don't use the term over. We use the word underpainting a lot, but if everything else was underpainting, then what can this be except overpainting? So I don't know if I'm inventing a term or if other people use it and I just haven't heard it, but this is the last layer of painting. Well, of course, unless I decide to do more tomorrow. When I come to this painting tomorrow, almost everything, hopefully everything I've done today will be dry. It's because I'm using drying agents. So an oil painting would not traditionally be dry the next day, but hopefully mine will. And of course, then at that point, I have the option of of doing another glaze on top of this. Yes, another glaze. But I won't worry, I'll worry about that when the day comes, tomorrow when I look at it. If I feel like it needs it, I'll do it. In which case, of course, this wedding painting, this particular wedding painting is taking quite a bit longer than my average. This is maybe the third or fourth time out of 70 some weddings that I've not finished and have brought the painting home with me in order to finish. So I usually do. Okay, there's a whole bunch of other stuff I would like to paint with this exact color, but before I do that, here's a teaching moment. I talk about this quite a bit. Let me put it this way. It is almost always a good idea, and I like to say there are not that many things in the world of painting that you can say almost always a good idea, but here is one. I have just, as you can see, I just had one color on my brushes, and I did a whole bunch of touch-up in this panel, in this bar, right? That is too much of one color. It irritates the viewer. The viewer, in fact, gets the impression, I wonder how, that gets the impression that the artist had one color mixed up and turned off his brain and just painted a whole bunch. Not a pleasant effect. So here's the antidote. Here's the way to fix that. It's almost always a good idea. When you're in the opaque realm of painting, which if you're a traditional oil painter, everything's opaque, but if you're me, or painting in like me and all the great masters through history, that's another story, it's almost always a good idea to come back with a slightly lighter color on your brushes. So I didn't clean my brushes. I just picked up some titanium white on top of what was already here. And I'm coming back, and here and there, and here and there, I am, on top of the last color that I did, I'm putting this slightly lighter color, and it's already working. Let me zoom in as much as I can right there. Do you see this? Now I'll do just a little bit more. Not too much. Now, having done it one time, could I do it yet again, twice? Could I follow this principle through yet one more time? And the answer is yes, absolutely I could. I don't think I need to in this case, but yes, you can do this principle more than once. The principle, or the trick, the tactic being, once, especially if you've laid down too much of one color, as I explained, I had done a few minutes ago. There was too much of that. So especially if you've had that situation, this is often a very good idea to mix up, and slightly is a key word. Has to be close enough to what's already there. If it's too much lighter than what was there, you do not get this pleasing effect necessarily. That doesn't mean you can't put down sharp highlights. So you can, but this is not sharp highlights. This is the principle I'm illustrating. It's often a good idea to come back and apply highlights, or no, highlights is too strong a word. Accents, there we go. Accents is a better word. Accents slightly lighter. Okay, I'm going to stop painting on that bar for a while. I'll probably come back to it later, but let me move on out. Let me get the cake is almost finished. The cake and the table that it's on are almost finished. Let me do just a little bit, a few accents again, or highlights. And I wonder if I should use a palette knife here, just a little bit along on some of these layers of the cake. Yeah, yeah. This one a little bit much there. Let's scrape some of that off. Or finger it off, as the case may be. Never paint with your fingers. I say that every time that I paint with my fingers. And of course I don't have any cads or cobalts on my palette, so I feel a little bit freer to paint with my fingers than I would otherwise. Okay, let's go over to, and again, let me get the camera to adjust. There we go. Maybe if I do that, it'll stay, keep the right exposure. Again, the huge arrangement of roses. It really was a beautiful arrangement. The size of a small tree, actually. And now up to this chandelier. So in this final stage of, again, this is typical of all my paintings, whether they are wedding paintings or plein air paintings or whatever they may be. My process is essentially the same. I'm down to the last layer of the painting process, and at this point, I'm playing very much with levels of abstraction. I'm not sure how to say that. It is very important that the brush strokes are interesting. Interestingness, can I use that, make up that word? Interestingness is paramount over similitude or realism. I'm trying to mix up a dirty yellow-orange color because I want to do a little bit of rendering on these chandeliers. So I just mixed up some more or less transparent I don't know, kind of a dark yellow ochre. And of course, like all chandeliers, this one was just a cornucopia of crystals. So I want to, first of all, put down some dark marks and then come back in a little while and do some light marks. While I'm doing that, though, I think I'll do a few touches on this chandelier over here. I much less detail over here, of course, but just enough to give you the feeling that there are two chandeliers in this scene. And while I've got some dark stuff on my brushes, I use a little bit of liquid, by the way, at this stage of the painting, just a little bit to make the paint flow and to make it dry faster. Not enough to make so much to make it transparent. But I want to do, they had these tree branches, bare twigs, extending out from these arrangements quite a bit, and it was very effective, and I want to capture a little bit more of that before I move on, before I go back to the light. So I'm violating my technique, so to speak, here by doing dark, transparent. Every once in a while, if your brush, if for stuff like this, if the brush paint doesn't flow, I just dip my brush very quickly in turpenoid to make it so you can do these long strokes like that. Long, snaky, twisty marks. Another technique that I use so much, I don't even think about it, it's so second nature, is often am twisting my brushes when I'm doing natural shapes like this. I do this all the time when I'm painting trees. Hey, it turns out what I've got on my brushes right now is actually not transparent. It's actually fairly opaque, translucent for sure, but it's a nice color for coming in and on these dark bottles, doing just a few accents. Can you see what I'm doing? Barely, I know. Here's the bartender back here. I'm going to lighten his shirt a little bit. So you all repeat after me. You get light, you get dark with transparents, light with opaques. So right now, even though I have a very dark color on my brushes, it's slightly lighter than what's here. That means I'm using, of course, an opaque paint to add just a little bit of accent light there. And I think, actually, I'm going to lighten it up ever so slightly. It might be a good color, a good value for doing this man's white shirt and a little bit of his face. I want to hint at the mother and father of the bride, and I do not have a picture of them, unfortunately. I wish I had snapped one, so I'm just going to have to, of course, keep it very abstract. But I want the main identifying characteristic is that the mother of the bride was wearing a pale blue dress. So I'll work on that dress just a little bit to try to give a nod to, in fact, to the people who paid me to do the painting. That's usually a good idea, don't you think? In other words, why am I not doing the parents of the groom? Which sometimes that is who pays me, but more typically it's the parents of the bride that are paying me, and of course, next to the bride and groom, the parents of the bride are sort of the guests of honor at a wedding, wouldn't you say? So what I'm doing here is very typical of the way I render figures in many of my paintings. I paint them often, as they are here, dark, silhouetted, if you will, and then come back and carve into them to make them just a little bit more realistic, and then often go back and forth several times, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, until I achieve the degree of realism that satisfies me for this painting. Okay, once again, so a few minutes ago you saw me doing some light color on these bottles. That sets me up to do this, but same color. You see, I used this same muddy brown, but it doesn't look like mud because it's on top of the darker color. But I use the same color all across there. Not a pleasant final effect. So I'm coming back now with a color that's slightly lighter than what was already there, and going on top of my previous marks. And then all is well. Just here and there, I hardly even have to explain why did I put this or that light mark there. That's just light bouncing off stuff. That's the answer. It's just, that's the way. You don't even have to explain every stroke at this level of abstraction. It just that's the way light does. It bounces off everything. I need to shape up this cake, don't I? I've got one side of the cake pretty well defined, but the other side looks like it's kind of misshapen. Can I say that? I can't say that. Listen to me. Misshapen. That's not what I meant. If you were with me on Saturday night, you heard me at one point in the acrylic underpainting stage say that I knew the painting, when it was done, would be predominantly just warm yellow-orange, because that was clearly the color, that was the color of the room that we were meeting in. And having a warm painting, nothing unusual about that. Most pleasant paintings, not all by any means, but most pleasant paintings are warm, tend toward the warm end of the color spectrum. And so because of that, I was careful to do, whoops, sorry, I'm out of your field, sorry. Because of that, I made a special point of doing some underpainting in purple blue. And most of that is now covered up, but there's a lot of little, I'm going to cover up even more right there. There's a lot of purple and even blue peeking through here and there throughout the painting, and by no means is there too much. Looking back now, I think, oh man, I could have done more of that, really. But at least I'm glad for what I did. It is definitely helping to give this otherwise extremely warm painting a little bit of variety. So again, I'm just glad that I've got all these little bits of underpainting color peeking through to create interest. It's a big part of why I paint the way I do, with the rather elaborate underpainting, elaborate approach to underpainting in acrylics, so that I have lots of interest underneath. I have run out. Show you my palette just for a minute. There it is. It's a glass palette, and every once in a while, when I get to this, where there's no more room for me to mix anything, because the whole thing is covered up, I'll take a razor blade. Sometimes I try to keep this stuff, but I can tell by the way I just rubbed the blade across the palette right then that I'm hitting lots of paint that has skinned over. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not dry, but it's leather dry. And that, when you get that stuff in your on your brushes and on your palette, it can really, it happens a lot, but it really creates a bit of a mess. So I'm just going to take a minute here, and before I put more titanium white on my palette, take a minute and clean this off. There's my, what's left of a little pile of liquid. Here's a trick, because there was actually paint underneath the liquid, so I just slid it off. Whew, what a mess. Now, some people really want to try to keep all this paint. I think I saw Michael Carter. You can find him on YouTube. He's a very good painter. Very different from me. I would not want to be Michael Carter. But he's a very good teacher, and I like the way he paints. I like the way he teaches. I don't want to do it, but I very much, and I've learned a lot of things. He's one of those that tries to keep all this stuff. Whew! If you mix all the leftover paint on your palette, if you mix it all up, it's called torrent gray. There's a name for that. It just means every color mixed, all the colors mixed together, random, whatever color. And if I were in need of some torrent gray, I might do that. But guess what? I already have several tubes of torrent gray somewhere in this cabinet, and so I'm not in need of any more at the moment. Now, while you're watching, I'm looking for pliers. Here. I'm going to refresh my palette a little bit. I am probably less fussy about green. That is, I don't have a set green color. This happens to be sap green, Charvan sap green. I'm probably less picky about green than any other color. It's because I first of all, hardly ever use it straight out of the tube, and you probably shouldn't either. Hardly ever would be a fair statement. So I'm always mixing my greens rather than using them, store-bought greens. Rainbow order, starting with, for me, in the lower left-hand corner, and I've done this for so long, and I tend to be sort of an orderly person. So if you're not an orderly person, you can ignore this completely. But this is purple or violet. And I think the technical word is violet, but most of us call it purple out of habit. And I believe that's dioxazine. Any color, any purple, violet will do. The next one is one of my favorites. That's permanent rose, a very cold red, and very transparent. My favorite red right there. Then Naphthol Crimson, deep, Scarlet Lake. Those are my three most typical reds. I don't need a cad red because I can get anything I want with those. Now the next one is the one that's tricky to achieve if you're avoiding cadmiums. Easy to, as I feel like, easy to get all the reds I need with a Scarlet Lake, Naphthol Crimson Deep, and Permanent Rose. And I don't think any human on the planet, I might be wrong about this, but I don't think any human can tell the difference between cadmium yellow, fake, hue, imitation, and real cad yellow. I can tell the difference between cad red and fake cad red, but I don't think anybody can. So yellow is no problem. This happens to be, again, Charvan, French yellow, medium. If I had a lemon yellow or a cad yellow light, it would go next to that because I treat it actually as a green more than as a yellow, and you should too. I don't know if you caught that. Let me say that again. Lemon yellow or Hansa yellow or cad yellow light. Do not think that that is a warm color. It's a freezing yellow. Of course, yellow is warm, but a cool yellow it's nearly green. It's nearly chartreuse. And I say this partly because I've seen so many students who pick up a tube of one of those colors, a light pale yellow, and they think they're doing something warm on their canvas when they are most certainly not. Okay, but I skipped over. Let me go back and okay, dioxazine, violet, permanent rose, Naphthol Crimson Deep, Scarlet Lake. This is any kind of orange hue, cad orange hue, fake, imitation. And then next, this is again one of my very favorite colors, is Indian yellow, then any number of other yellows, and I make it, if it's cad yellow, imitation. Any green, I don't care. Chromium oxide, viridian green, sap green, permanent green, light, and so on and so forth. I put down any color, that's just me. And I do a lot of outdoor painting, but I'm always mixing a green, so I don't care. This is phthalo blue, very important, phthalo blue. Some people don't like it because it's too powerful. Well, just get used to driving it, man. Just use less, that's all. Phthalo blue and ultramarine. And if you combine those two, you get a color that is so close to cobalt blue that I've had many students who can't tell the difference. I'll put cobalt blue here and this combination here, and they can't tell which is which. That's good enough for me. So that's the end of the rainbow. See, the next color here would be violet. Are you with me? It's a circle. That's the end of the color wheel. And then I do my browns, light to dark. So this is a yellow ochre, which of course is not a yellow, it's a brown. It's called yellow ochre. That's the lightest brown. Or somebody makes a Naples yellow, which I like very much as well. It's just very much lighter than this, and it could go in between there. Then this is something odd. What is it? This is Michael Harding, which is fantastic paint, by the way. Michael Harding transparent oxide yellow. I don't use that all the time, but I've got it here and I like it very much. And then the last one is very important to me. This is one of my favorite colors in the whole world, and this is the brand I like the best, is Charvan's Oxide Red. Again, it's called red, but it's not red, it is brown. Here, just for sake of comparison, here is burnt sienna. Let's see if you can tell the difference. I'm just going to put this up so you can. I often say, if you don't know what oxide red is, I say it's very close to burnt sienna. So burnt sienna, this is a Georgian good paint company. This is just slightly lighter than this, but almost the same. You probably can't even tell the difference. Anyway, there's my palette. I haven't done a tour of my palette in a long time. And then I'll add to my pile of liquid. It's a liquid gel, so it doesn't. I don't like liquids. I don't like things that run. So I like the gel quite a bit. And finally, here's my inexpensive tube wringer. You drop a tube of paint on the floor and you step on it. By the way, here's the better tube wringer, which I used a minute ago. And this is my titanium white, and I think you've seen me do this before. Instead of making one pile that'll get contaminated as you mix it, if you mix this pile with yellow, you don't want to come back later and want to mix that same pile. So don't make one big pile of titanium, make several little piles, so as they get contaminated, you can keep your color family separated. And again, this is an alkyd, which means fast dry oil paint. For the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, I can't remember how long, I buy almost nothing but alkyd titanium white. Otherwise, my paintings would take weeks to dry, and I don't have weeks to dry. Okay, whew. Boy, that was quite the detour, wasn't it? So let's get back to the business of painting. Now with my nice new clean palette. Woohoo, I'm all excited. And I can't, did anybody leave any comments? I don't know if I can pull them up. No, I'll have to look at them later. Again, I don't need to make you watch me too much. I'm going to add some roses to this arrangement. These roses, of course, will not be as bright as those. That makes sense, right? It's further away. It doesn't get as much attention from our eyes. But I want it to look like, of course, like it's the same kind of arrangement. So I've got to put some roses on it. One of the last things I'm going to do, I guess I'll do it right now. So I'm actually picking up a little bit of my sap green. But if it was a different green, I would just mix it till I got the color I want. I'm adding a little bit of yellow ochre to that sap green and white. And hey, Northern Ontario, good to have you on board. And I love Northern Ontario. In fact, I have a brother who's lived in Japan for 36 years, but he's spending the winter this winter in North Bay. How about that? I think that's going to be too bright, too light, so let me darken this up real quick. I was born in Canada. My brother that I just mentioned, who's lived in Japan for 35 years, actually went back to his Canadian citizenship just 4 or 5 years ago. So I'm not sure if that's why he's in Canada. He's there because he's teaching English to Japanese students. That's what he's done in Japan for many years. So this little bit, I've got green in the underpainting. Yeah, I'm assuming you can see that. I'm going to darken this just a little bit too bright still. So I'm adding ultramarine to it and a little bit of that transparent yellow oxide. Now this is clearly a case with this green where I'm going to, again, do that same trick again, where I put down several bits of this same bit of green over a broad area, right? Which would be generally unpleasant if I left it with just that one layer of color. Let me look at my photograph again. See if I like what's going on here. Oh yeah, so there are some green leaves coming out on some of these twigs. Some of the twigs are bare and some of them have leaves on them. So that's a nice little detail. I'm glad to capture that. So I will, as I said, I'll mix up. Let's do it right now. So I'm going to pull in some yellow ochre and some titanium white on the brushes that I was just using without cleaning them. So now it's just a lighter color, lighter and slightly yellower green, and I need to make it lighter again. So I didn't pick up quite enough. Not enough of it. It was too close to what was already there. So here we go. So on top of the little bits that I've already done, again, it's almost always a good idea to come back and do little highlights, and then that irritating sense that a viewer would get, that it would look as though the artist just picked up his brushes and painted the same color here, there, here, there, here, there, which is exactly what I did. But we don't like to see that. So coming back and going on top of those green, it doesn't mean I can't do some of this color outside of that. Of course I can. But that's a good trick. I wish somebody had taught me that 30 years ago or more. I would have learned that. I would have learned that if somebody had taught me that. Appreciate you guys watching me eat a little bit. Okay, that might be enough over there. Actually, might be too much. Hang on. Here's another trick. So I look at that and say, oh man, this got a little bit dotty. Do you see, kind of like polka dotty? Here's one way to fix that. It's just pick up a fan brush and just smudge those marks. Now I'm not done yet. I'm not done. That is not, the smudged look is not a pleasant look. And then come back on top of that again and do just a few highlights on top of where I just smudged. I don't know if you caught that or not. I've talked about that in several of my videos where I talk about how to make some part of your painting lighter. One way is to smudge, the word is scumble, an opaque paint, a light colored paint over much of the area. But the scumbled look is not a good final look. So you need to come back like I'm doing here after messing up with a fan brush, then come in and do just a little bit more detail. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, I'm just about to leave you again. Probably I'll probably wrap this up. Call this project, this painting, done. Let you stay with me for just a minute. I'm mixing up another green over here and add just enough liquid to that so that it won't, so hopefully all this will be dry tomorrow. I like my paintings to dry sort of evenly. I don't want any little bits that are still wipeable. Can I use that word? I think it'd be wiped off, with your finger, with your thumb tomorrow. I want everything to be pretty much dry, especially so that if I decide to do another layer of glazes, I will have that option open to me. I'm going to do some of the chandelier up here. I'm going to hit some highlights on these bottles. It's too flat. I don't have any sparkle on those yet. And I'm going to work on the bride and groom, the bride's mother and father were here. Then I might be done. And so this is a good place for me to stop because it's getting a little bit too detailed for you to even see what I'm doing. I don't want to keep going if you can't see what's going on. So I will bid you a fond good night. Thank you so much for joining me. And I'll be back. I've got several little projects I'm working on all at the same time, which makes me happy. I love having, several projects going on. So I should have lots of material for broadcasting in the next couple of days. And I always appreciate your company, appreciate your comments, appreciate you subscribing. And happy painting to you. Bye-bye.